Good morning, Cheryl Coviello, GCA, and we are the Moody Point team. I just want to take a moment to introduce our team members. And there we go. Great, there we go. It would be amiss if I don't give thanks to Trevor Matera with Prep. He was our team coordinator and provided great guidance and some background information about the site and the Great Bay as a whole, which is wonderful information to have. I'd also like to thank the Moody Point Community Association, their environment committee. They were our direct contact for this and coordinated with us, and Ginger Krause, Jim Turney, and John Guthrow. So they were great to work with and shared a lot of information with us to help us develop our concepts for this project. In order of presentation today, we have Steve Herzog. He's an ecologist with Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions. And he will speak on some of the general project goals and our project scope. Cornelius Murphy is a landscape architect with whole system design. He'll give us a summary of some of the site challenges that we developed to define for this project. And then with Conor, Ofsthun, with he's a coastal scientist with Woods Whole Group. He'll talk about some more of the environmental type challenges and our no action vision for the site. Wickie is our vacant seat. She is on Zoom today. We have a pre-recording segment from her that we'll try to play, and hopefully that goes well. She'll talk about some of the coastal upland solutions we developed. She's an independent landscape designer. I'll jump in after Wickie and talk about some of the functional improvements we have for some of the water access issues for the community. And then Troy, our stream restoration specialist with Tighe and Bond, will talk about concepts, designs for the actual shoreline solutions that we developed. Thanks.
So our first goal of this project was to decide on what our goals should be. The community association expressed concern in a large area. Moody Point owns about 1 mile of shoreline on Great Bay. So we focused on the point around their existing dock and pier, screen house. So you see the west shore, central upland, central shore. The landowner's principal goals were to address shoreline and bank erosion. There's a steep bank just behind the pier. To improve ease of water access, they store kayaks and launch kayaks from that dock. And they wanted to make sure their solutions were permittable and understandable to the community, to the residents who would have to vote and fund any actions that were taken. So from their expressed goals, we derived our ecological goals, which are to address shoreline erosion, both the salt marsh and the steep bank, and promote aggradation of salt marsh such that with future sea level rise scenarios, the marsh may be able to migrate, to mitigate bank erosion, and to manage the human impacts. It's a highly used area. There's a screen house, as I said, and the shore access. There's soil compaction and stormwater runoff from that central upland as well. So I'll pass it on to Cornelius to dive into our challenges.
So this is a photo taken of the central upland. The area that we were looking at suffers from some of the same characteristics that you'd see in any really well-used, well-trafficked area. It's compacted soils, lack of vegetation. They don't have a well-organized place to store the kayaks, so they're just sort of kept in a large footprint all along the point. And you can see the screen house off to the right is a really beautiful destination, if you can imagine, just sitting on the edge of the Great Bay. They have large gatherings there. It's very well frequented. And it's causing, you can kind of see a little bit of a runoff down the middle of that central upland in the middle of the photo. And just over the side of the bank, kind of where the dock is, on either side is some significant erosion, and especially under the dock or the deck, sorry, off of the screen house is also a lot of erosion. They also don't have good functional water access. So this is the dock and the pier. it's a very narrow pier that leads out to the dock. It's constricted. The kayaks are kept a little bit downslope and not stored up high. So there's sort of a whole process to grab the kayak, pull it up slope, make your way down the dock into the deck. And so the gangway into the deck. And one of the things we wanted to try and improve was the ease of use and functionality for the people that are coming to this place, at the same time of improving the overall ecological health of the Upland area as well.
Thank you. All right, I'll talk about the shoreline and how there are some issues with erosion. Where Moody Point is at a headland, our project site is at a headland, it bears the brunt of wave attack across a pretty wide fetch area, like Kevin, I think, mentioned earlier today. So there is a maximum of about a little over 3 miles of fetch with which wind can pick up waves and drive this wave energy into the shoreline. And that's causing erosion at the headland area. You can see that picture of the left, the roots of those trees are being exposed. There used to be some fringing marsh at the base of that bank there that has since been degraded, likely through wave and tidal action. Also, some stormwater runoff issues might be progressing that as well. Beside the headland, there are kind of a little more protected areas that have some marsh, but they have their own issues, which I'll talk about now. You can see the 2 purple areas on this photo. To the left is historic. On the left side is a historic marsh area, and on the right northern side is another historic marsh area. So there used to be a much greater area of salt marsh. It's since been eroding slowly, like many of the other sites that these projects are dealing with. We have erosion pins in there that'll hopefully be long-term to measure that long-term rate of erosion. The erosion is occurring through wave action, tidal currents, calving of the marsh, maybe some ice rafting. There is wrack, which is dead vegetated debris, which is being lifted by the high tides and being placed on top of the marsh and killing off the vegetation, which is then decreasing its structural resilience, and then that piece of the marsh might break off. There are a few issues, as you can see in the picture. Let's go with the picture on the bottom right over here. Might be hard to see. There's a little berm. There's a little elevated feature there, cutting right down the border of the marsh. And that's an old agricultural berm. There used to be agricultural activity here, and that was built to keep the tides out. But since that has affected the way the marsh would naturally, the processes would naturally work, it's keeping the tide out from the area inland and hurting the health of the wetland on the inland side. And that berm is also acting as a barrier to wrack, and the wrack is just butting up against it and depositing, and it's killing off material there. So with these kind of erosion conditions, one of the headland, one of the marshes, if we do nothing, they will probably continue. They're projected to continue. And they may become more exacerbated actually with sea level rise. So this grouping of pictures on the left, these two, this is SLAM results. SLAM is a sea level rise affecting marsh migration model. These are statewide results available publicly. And you can see there's a yellow highlighted area called salt marsh in the top left picture, and then the same yellow highlighted area, and then a red area fringing around it, basically to show that as sea level rises by 2050, the marsh wants to migrate inland. And we don't have there's not very much development in this particular spot of Moody Point, so there may actually be space for the marsh to migrate inland. And that's what would happen with no action. So that's in some ways, from the habitat's perspective, a positive result. There's space for the marsh to migrate inland, but there are also those man-made features like that agricultural berm, which might be inhibiting the ability for the marsh to do that. And then on the picture on the right, this is a picture of sea level rise, advancing to our design level of sea level rise, which we decided on 2 feet, and showing that the headland is going to be slowly be wrapped around by the high tide line, and the shoreline will be moving upland and inland with time. that will probably be exacerbating shoreline erosion. I'll pass it on.
This is Wickie's recorded segment.
Hello, everyone. The Central Upland should be considered a Phase 2 project because it's needed for staging for shoreline work. This is the social hub of the Moody Point waterfront. It is where kayaks are stored and launched from, and where social gatherings and just basically sitting and enjoying the water can happen. Issues that we had, challenges, was that there's quite a bit of runoff coming down this hills. The ground is compacted. There's very little vegetation and there aren't any delineated walking paths. So all of this is contributing to the degradation of the bank, you can see. Also, it's a little bit cumbersome to launch a kayak, having to go down these 3 stairs and then down the, or 4 stairs and go down the dock to launch your kayak. So we were hopeful that we could kill 2 birds with 1 stone and make the kayak experience easier while also creating an environment for more water retention in this area here. So the plan was to build a berm here on the plan, basically to the left in this long photo on top here. Build a berm which would allow for some grading of this area, adding a little bit more soil, adding some soil on top of the compacted area and planting native ground covers. Also the creation of a walking path that would make it easier for people to come down and enjoy the water and not further compact the soil. Then here, there's on the left, you see here is a ribbon of gravel or crushed stone to put kayak stands on. Low ones, there's a sort of basic general idea where you pick a cubby hole and you put your kayak in there, and then it is easy to pull it out, walk down, and launch your kayak. The stairs here have been removed. I think I said that, but I might have forgotten. So another picture here. Here's a picture of the screen house. There are currently no gutters there, so it was recommended that gutters and rain barrels be installed. Here's the mulch path, low plants and ground covers, which is this area right here. And here's a view of it from the dock. Finally, some before and after pictures. As far as monitoring goes, it would be a fairly simple visual inspection after a heavy rain or other weather event, just to make sure there isn't any runneling or puddling that could be compromising the design, and that could be fixed. Also monitoring plant health, making sure that they are establishing properly, and making sure that people are obeying the pathways so that there isn't compacted ground, which was what we were trying to avoid in the first place. We also talked a little bit about things that could be done to the dock to make it slightly more comfortable experience, gentle experience, and for that I will pass it off to Cheryl.
Great. So yes, so as Wickie was mentioning, one of the goals that Moody Point had was around their water access. When we first met with them, they asked, is there a way we can incorporate another different water access because of the difficulties they have with their current float and gangway? And we took that goal and we looked at what they have for existing conditions and looked at how can we provide an improvement to them with what they already had. So we kept within the same kind of environmental impact or close to it. And one of the ways we could do this is their existing gangway is a standard length pretty much for around our seacoast area, but it's a little short for them for the water, the height of their pier that they have. So if they increase the gangway length and make it a little wider, so it facilitates ease of bringing down the kayaks, we can move the float out a little bit. And when we looked at this evaluation, we checked where eelgrass has been mapped in the area to make sure we weren't going to impact eelgrass with this recommendation, and also made sure that we wouldn't interfere with the navigation channel. So those are really brief, quick, simple solution to help with their water access. And we have our 1 minute. So there you go, Troy.
Excellent. So in the essence of time, some of the details, I'm going to break this down as we had to filter a mile of shoreline into, I guess, the most doable and presentable to the needs of the landowners, as well as what's permittable and gain on establishing better habitat and ecological uplift. We looked at the central and west shores, and the central shores considered the cross sections 7 and 8 on either side of the dock that was just presented for lengthening. And cross section 6 is what we call the west shore. Zooming into the central shore, this is where the bluff occurs. If you look at the lower left, cross section 7 and cross section 8 correspond to the design concepts 7 and 8 on the right side. It's a pretty steep 1-to-1 slope, a lot of soil loss, trees are falling in, they're growing crooked. It's fairly unstable. It is feeding the bottom lower marsh. However, it's retreating very quickly. So the idea here was to allow this continuum from low marsh to high marsh into upland a little more time to deal with sea level rise and the encroachment of waves that are coming in. And I have a pointer here, this one. The idea is to establish some root wads or large trees at this this mean high water elevation, as well as up here at this wave elevation plus the mean high water, so that we can deal with some of the attacking waves. And in between, we would build these soil burritos or fabric encapsulated soil lifts and plant them with native low marsh, high marsh, upland, depending on the zone we're in. This is really to, while it's quite a bit of work up front, it allows some time for this marsh to migrate inward, was the concept here. These are some photos, examples of what a fabric encapsulated soil lift would look like. On the left, these are steps. These are coconut core fabrics that are planted. This is an example of one that was installed recently, last fall. This is some of the construction and how they're built in lifts. These get planted with the various planting zones. Some brush aggradation bundles to deal with catching rack or potential wave encroachment can be installed pretty minimally without much excavation. And here's an idea of what these root wads would look like with the attacking waves at the toe of this shoreline itself to protect it and buy some time. Onto the west shore. This case here, it's a lot lower than the bluffs that are to the right. We have a perched wetland. The goal here was to cut a runnel in here and allow some tidal flushing to allow this this perched wetland to perform better over time. Again, some more photos of what an aggradation or root wads would look like, and these were actually being installed recently along a shoreline. And with that, in the essence of time, I will talk quickly about, we did look at the range for our tide range, as well as the growth zones that we established through our surveys, and came up with a planting plan through these zones as well. And with that, I'll pass it on to Cornelius to talk about next steps quickly.
Sure. So
30 seconds,
well,
you can do it.
just quickly, there's a whole consideration of phasing and how this project should be rolled out or done. Wickie mentioned it on the top in her presentation. The uplands is likely going to have to come after any improvements done in and around the shore, just because of the disturbance that would be created. And we didn't consider the North Shore or screenhouse area in the deck foundation. We just thought that there was more evaluation and time that was needed to address that area. It seemed sort of out of the scope of this project. And then just permitting considerations and trying to figure out where the balance between what is permittable and where we can get the most ecological uplift.
All right, well, let's say big thank you to these guys.